the Bahrain Grand Prix on the outset looked to be an excellent race, and although after the end of the race I have a lot of things to complain with, or about really, I'm going to put that all aside right now, and I'm going to do the Bahrain Grand Prix in review. Now, I think not just myself, but everybody is sad/horrified at what happened at the end of the race, and how George Russell pretty much got his Mercedes. I mean, he's not going to be able to do this again. It doesn't look like he'll be able to go in for Lewis. Next race, it looks like Lewis is recovering, which is great. But again, I think we all want to see George winning a race, which he was inches away from today. Truly inches. But, let's get into the race. Now, to start it all off with, we had Valtteri Bottas falling back in the field, and his starts this year have been pretty horrible. And the fact that George Russell jumped him at the start was an electrifying moment. It looks like George Russell had just gotten the measure of the almost world champion Valtteri Bottas. I was screaming into my TV at that point, Bottas's career is over, and I think at this point it is. So let's get into the race start. Now, after that, and Max had some interesting, rude words to say. He got smashed off the track by an overexcited Charles Leclerc, an overexcited Frenchman, and he hit Perez, or Leclerc did, who sent Verstappen into the barriers, so Verstappen and Leclerc out instantly. But Perez was able to continue in the race, even though I think there should be an inquiry about that because his rear wing mounting throughout the race, I did watch that. That does not look safe, and I think that possibly contributed to his straight line speed. I'm not going to say that it needs to be disqualified, but FYA, please look at that. I'm not sure if that was a great idea by Racing Point to keep him going in the race. It could have endangered him, and it would be a real joke. F1 would look like a real joke of a sport if there was a Romain Grosjean-like incident 2 weeks in a row at the same racetrack. I think we have dodged a bullet with the Perez rear wing incident, but it could have been much worse. Now, at that point, there was a safety car, because he had these two cars just sitting in the middle of one of the turns. So they got them out of the way, and after they got the cars out of the way, the race got back underway, and George Russell started pulling a lead. Oh my god, George Russell was leading a race, and there was a point where I can't remember what lap, but there was a lap in the race where they came over the radio and said, George, you are now the person with the third most laps led of 2020. Now that was incredible because George had just started leading more laps than Max Verstappen, a man who is at Red Bull. Now at this point in the race, you had Sergio Perez moving up the field from last place. And this was set to be pretty interesting. So we had to just wait, and he overtook Alex Albon and Lando Norris on the same lap, so you knew something interesting was coming from Perez. Now, from the outset, Lando Norris was on a very aggressive strategy, and it was clear that it was going to not work at some point. And at this point in the race, about lap 55, it was clear that that strategy was not going to work. And this was after Nicholas Latifi had his car sort of break. It's not clear, actually. It looks like Mercedes has hidden this, but that is going to be 2 engine failures in a row for Mercedes. There's not really much to say. I think Mercedes has created a very good engine this year, but it is not one that is reliable as they would hope. And it'll be interesting to see what Toto Wolff has to say about this. And for those who've forgotten, Sergio Perez DNF'd last week with an engine failure. So it's not clear, but by lap 55, Sainz was in 3rd place, Russell leading, Bottas in 2nd. Ricciardo was in 4th place with Esteban Ocon in a very interesting place strategically in 5th place. Both of the racing points were next to each other. Stroll in 6th, Perez in 7th, but there was a team order there for Perez to not pass Stroll. However, later in the race, he did do this. Now, this is where the race starts going downhill for Mercedes. There was a safety car for Nicholas Latifi's car that had been in the middle of the track, and Mercedes didn't have to actually. They decided to pit Russell and Bottas. Now, it was a very slow pit stop for Russell, about 5 to 6 seconds, but the real problem was that they had some of Bottas's tires on George Russell's car, which for those who know, that is illegal, so they had to pit him again later. But the comical thing was, Mercedes did it again, so 2 years in a row now they've done one of these clownishly long pit stops with Bottas. First his front wheel wouldn't go on, then his rear wheel wouldn't go on, and they couldn't get the front wheel back on again. Then his brakes caught on fire, and there was fire coming out of the brakes. Eventually they put the old hard tires on there, which were 18 laps old. Mercedes are very bad at the pit stops, and today's race has proven that. Nobody can say that Mercedes have a good pit stops, excuse me. And the funnier thing is that Williams today, the team that's currently in last place in the Constructors' Championship, all around had faster pit stops than Mercedes. Just take that in. For those people that don't like Williams, at least they have extremely fast pit stops. Remember that. Now, at this point in the race, George Russell was not doing too bad. He was in front of Bottas, but there was a safety car, remember that, and Mercedes had to pit him again. So he came out behind Bottas, but here is the important thing to remember. This was a safety car period, and George Russell was on brand new medium tires, and he was the fastest man on track for 4 laps. And then it all went downhill, and at that point I was screaming at my TV, and I was really not happy. George picked up a puncture from a previous incident that was caused by Jack Aitken. His front wing came off, and he spread debris all over the track. Now, nobody else got punctures, just bad luck on that case, but George did, and it ruined his race. So he got back on the soft tires, was in dead last, and started to make his way back through the field. And this is where it gets not funny for Bottas, but I think this was the point where Bottas' career pretty much just ended. In the words of the great Tommo F1, Bottas fell through the field like a plum. He literally lost so many positions in that one not last lap, but in one of these later laps. I just started laughing at the screen. It was just unbelievable to see this nearly world champion, teammate of Lewis Hamilton, was losing positions and blaming it on the tires. He has no excuses, but Perez at this point was leading the race. This is really interesting. Now, I feel very strongly about this race result. Perez, in my opinion, does not deserve it. His team should have pitted him and just told him to retire the car. He had damage that I think possibly put him in a place that was going to risk the lives of others. I didn't think it was a very safe idea to keep Perez in the race, but apparently, when you have a team owned by British people, run by Canadians, and driven by Canadians and Mexicans, apparently that's just something that you can do. Lance Stroll is probably the most useless driver of this race, however, even though Bottas lost positions. As Lance Stroll was in the second fastest car, the Racing Point was the second fastest car this weekend, as some people may know, or at least in the race it was. And he could not overtake a Renault, a car that was struggling on tires, Esteban Ocon. I feel quite strongly that after this drive, Lance Stroll does not deserve a seat in F1, and I believe there will be many people agreeing with me at this point. It's too bad to see this. We thought Lance was making progressions, but it looks like he just isn't. And you can't keep somebody in F1 who isn't going forward. He's going backwards. He's treading water / going backwards. This podium does not say something good about his... the fact that he's in third place and just couldn't get up to second, that says something about Lance Stroll, and it's not a good thing. And I don't think people should take this as another podium, that's a good thing. It just isn't. It isn't a good thing. Now, as we're on the final lap of the race, George Russell got pretty close to Bottas, and this is where Bottas' career pretty much ended. He was one place ahead of George Russell, but he was a pit stop ahead of George Russell. In theory, he should have been 23 seconds ahead of George Russell. I will not cut Valtteri Bottas any slack after today. He is barely deserving of a Mercedes drive, and I think we all should know that. Toto Wolff acknowledged that George Russell drove excellently today and he deserved the win, and he was wavering on saying that Sergio Perez had no right to be in the winner's spot. He didn't. I think it was really odd what Toto was saying in the interviews, but at least he acknowledged that George Russell was the deserving winner today, even though he didn't win the race. I think if there's anything to take away from this race, George Russell needs another chance. He needs a race where Mercedes doesn't screw him over. He doesn't need a race where he needs another race and the Mercedes car, and this is going to be a question of luck now. If Lewis Hamilton recovers from his coronavirus positive test and he is now COVID negative, then in that case, George Russell is not going to be in the Mercedes car. He will be racing in the Williams, which if he can get points finish in that thing, excellent. That car is probably the hardest to drive on the grid right now, even though it's not the slowest, it is probably the hardest to drive. Slowest being the Alfa Romeo, and for those who know, the Alfa Romeo has the aerodynamics of a nice brick, and it has the engine as effective as an anchor. And when I say that, I really am not kidding. Now for the Constructors' Championship, Racing Point has overtaken McLaren in the standings, and if they do stay in third place, it'll be really interesting. Knowing that their car broke the rules to be as quick as it is, it's not much of a surprise. It shows how valid and important the current set of F1 regulations are, and how teams just shouldn't break them. It gives them an unfair technical advantage. You know, Racing Point was the 9th fastest car last year. They're now, on average, the 3rd fastest car this year. It is too bad. I think McLaren is deserving of the 3rd place seat in the Constructors' Championship. No, they worked really hard this year. But it's going to be really interesting next year, because they're going to have a Mercedes engine. I think they'll really be able to take the fight to Racing Point. It's not a guarantee that they'll be able to beat Racing Point, but it will be truly exceptional to see two teams battle it out for that 3rd place seat. But more importantly, next year, Racing Point is actually going to be called Aston Martin. And I think it'll be different. As the team goes, it'll be a truly different team. You know, you're going to have Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. I don't like the fact that Lance Stroll is at that team. I don't think Perez is deserving of a drive there either. But I think it would be better if, there was a young driver there, maybe George Russell, while he waits for that Mercedes seat that Bottas is lurking in. Obviously you're not going to take Stroll out, though. His dad owns the team. Why would his dad take his son out of a position like that? It's illogical. But that's pretty much the Constructors' Championship fight. Renault is far and away out of that race. They're 6th at this point, and they're just not going to be able to come back. It is too bad for Renault. I think that they really screwed up this year. They had podiums. They had more podiums than the other two teams. Obviously, they had no wins, but even still, they were really close to the Mercedes at times in terms of cornering speeds, and I think they just dropped the ball on their straight line speeds. It is too bad, but that's how it happened. Final note before the beginning of next race, it is going to be next week, and Pietro Fittipaldi will be taking Roman Grosjean's seat for next week, because Grosjean will not be racing at Haas. His Formula 1 career has come to a close. It is very sad, however, it's happened. And he will not be racing next week for Haas. As I've said previously, Hamilton not confirmed, and if Russell stays at Mercedes, then Jack Aitken will stay at Williams. And for somebody who's never raced a Formula 1 car before, he did not make too much of a bad impression today. I think it was impressive, even though he did crash. If you did enjoy today's video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We will not be doing a Technically F1 podcast this week. Just a lot of stuff going on in Formula 1, really complicated, so we won't be doing that. But we will be doing another review of next week's race, and possibly another video this week. Thank you. Now for the third final thing, guess what? Mick Schumacher won the Formula 2 championship. Now I think we're all super hyped about this. He's going into Haas next year. He's going to do amazingly. And Mick, we just can't wait for that. Also, I hope he gets to Ferrari. I mean, this guy is just amazing. And I'm not a Mick Schumacher fanboy, but I really do hope he gets to Ferrari, because he has a lot of skill he can offer them.